Okay, we're gonna try this one more time. Oh
Hello?
my God, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm
It's
so
so,
sorry. I had so many people join and then like X out, and I feel so bad.
me too. I don't know what happened. So good
Ah,
to have
I'm
an
so sorry.
No. I don't know what happened, but I was like, that is so strange. It's like I saw the speaker thing there is on, so I don't know why. But yeah,
Well, now we're here, and I'm so excited to talk to
perfect.
you today. For
Yeah,
everybody joining, we've been having technical issues, and we finally got
we start.
live with Anna Tai. She's a nutrition and dietitian, and she specializes in ADHD as well as autism, autoimmune issues, and issues like cystic fibrosis, which my son actually has.
Oh,
And so I wanted you to talk to us about nutrition and how to
sure.
optimize our health and be able to focus better. You also are the writer of Eat to Focus, which
Yep.
is, I mean, such a great name. I'm really excited to dive in with you today, but I want to let you kind of go over your backstory first and
Sure.
let everybody know a little bit about you and why you do what you do and why you care so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me today. I'm so honored. I'm so excited.
I
So,
know.
um, yeah, thank you for the introduction. So, little bit background about me. So, I'm a registered dietitian and also a board certified specialist in pediatric nutrition. So, ever since I started my career in nutrition, I always know that I want to specialize in children nutrition. So I was so lucky to be able to do that. And I really love what I do every day. So um, basically, the last 20 years, I've been working at Triplet Army Medical Center. So I have a lot of experience working with different kind of like special kids with special needs, healthcare needs. So I think I learned um, a lot of the things I learned is because being treating children, there's not a lot of medical protocol. So a lot of times with kids with like very special medical condition, I pretty much have to do all the research on my own. So I have to figure out if they have a genetic disorder or some kind of mutation, have to figure out which body parts is being affected, what body function is being affected, and figure out a kind of a game plan for them as far as nutrition. And then how I came to like with the ADHD is kind of like my own personal story, but it kind of started
Those are
with
the best kind.
yeah, so like it kind of started with me working with kids, and I do see a lot of ADHD patients like in the very beginning, because many of you probably know that with the ADHD medication, there's a lot of side effects. And one of the biggest or very common side effects is that it suppresses the appetite. So I ended up seeing a lot of kids who have like coming to see me because they stop growing, they stop gaining weight, they refuse to eat. So that's majority of the ADHD patient that I see. And then the other type of ADHD patient that I see are the ones that are newly diagnosed and parents like, I don't want to try the medication. I want to try something more natural first. So that's the other type of referral that I get for a patient with ADHD. And that was in the beginning of my career when I started specializing in kids. I was like, okay, this medication is like so bad. So I see a lot of this patient, not just because like they're not gaining weight, not growing, but like I hear from the kids, from their parents, like, oh my God, it takes my child's personality away. My child just turned into a zombie. They lost their creativity. And then all these other side.
I'm so happy to hear you saying all of this because
Mhm,
that happened to me, but having
mhm,
you validate it by
yeah.
being like
Hmm.
being with all of these children and seeing their symptoms. And
Yep.
also a symptom of ADHD is um, gut issues and IBS symptoms.
Yep.
So yeah.
I, I know, like that's why like I feel like I'm so close to these people. I'm seeing all these things. And like I said, the other type of ADHD patient that I see are the ones that who didn't want medication, right? Somehow they know that there's a better way, there's an alternative. And the doctor know, oh yeah, send them to a nutrition. Maybe she can figure out something for them, right? So I was like, okay, someone kind of knows something. So then, like after a while, I start noticing there's this psychiatrist. I have patients who coming to me still not gaining weight. And I saw this psychiatrist, like he start prescribing coffee to the kids. So, and I was like thinking, okay, why is he start telling the patient to start drinking coffee? And also this is like about over 10 years ago. There's this new medication that just came out. It's basically a pharmaceutical grade fish oil, super high concentration fish oil that is prescription only. So he was prescribing patients with coffee and this prescription fish oil. So I was like, what's this guy doing? Like, why is he doing, like, having this, prescribing the fish oil, super high dose fish oil and coffee to the ADHD kids? So I start looking it up. But back then I didn't even think about like contacting him and asking, right? So I just do my own research. I was like, okay, I see. So caffeine itself is a natural stimulant. So I was like, okay, if caffeine works, why do the doctors keep prescribing this like medication that changed the child's personality, cause them to not gain weight and refuse eating? And I also look up fish oil. So fish oil is actually one of the most researched food supplements for ADHD. So usually fish oil is the first thing that I recommend parents to start their kids on for focus, especially because I noticed that a lot of child who started on fish oil tends to have like really good focus afterwards. It doesn't resolve all the symptoms, but it's one of the things that helps a lot.
Those with ADHD, just for anyone listening, are deficient in omega-3s. So having fish oil is very helpful.
Yeah.
We're deficient in a lot of vitamins, actually. Vitamin B12, magnesium, fish oil.
Yeah,
and I think, yes, Tandy, I know. You've taught me. So Tandy, I did her gut reset. If you see Tandy here, she's a healer and specialist in Pilates and has Unicorn Wellness Studio, but she wrote a book that helped me because it helped her with celiac. And you help those with celiac and autoimmune diseases as well. And caffeine and fish oils can help stimulate the brain and have better brain function. And she taught me a lot about that, but now I've been diving more into it. And so anyways, I'm excited that she's here for this conversation.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I started like looking into like the more natural side of ADHD. And then years later, when my daughter is in elementary school, I started noticing, oh my God, like she has such a hard time like focusing, doing homework. Like I almost have PTSD with the word homework because every night we're up till 1 o'clock doing homework. And I was like so worried because I was like, I don't want to take her to a doctor, and I know what the doctor's gonna do. They're gonna put her on medication. I was like, she's not going on that medication. I'm not gonna let her be on the medication because she's already a picky eater. She cannot lose her appetite, and I don't want her personality to go away. So I was like, I've seen enough of those patients. Let me do more research on my own. So then I kind of started doing some research on my own and figure out like there's a lot of vitamins and minerals that are deficient in kids with ADHD. And from my experience, what I see is a lot of times these kids, they don't eat the best diet, but it's not as simple as like, oh yeah, they just eat like junky food all the time. That's why they have a deficiency. But somehow it started, for some kids, it started when they're still in the mother's body. Like if mom is...
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so now I actually think back, I was like, yeah, because my ex-husband smoked. So I was like, okay, I see where some of that influence came from, right? And I try to eat very well myself during pregnancy. But then when I was pregnant with her, I was still kind of new in my career. So I don't really know a whole lot about what I know now. So I'm pretty sure I did a few things that didn't help her either. But yeah, so I started noticing some of the behavior in her, and I was like, oh no, I need to find something. So I started looking deeper, and I was like, okay. So I found a bunch of research that do show that so kids with ADHD tends to be there are about 5 different nutrients that they're pretty low on. So number 1 is omega-3 fatty acid. which actually is part of the brain components. About 10% of our brain is actually omega-3 fatty acids. Then number 2 is magnesium. About 70 to 90% of people in general have low magnesium level. And then the third one is zinc. So what I notice is a lot of the kids, especially picky eaters who doesn't eat very well, so they tend to end up eating a lot of like kid food. So basically all the junk processed food, those things doesn't have much zinc in it or any kind of minerals. So zinc is the third one. And then iron is a very common one as well. Because if you look at all of the kids that I see, pretty much the diet consists of chicken nuggets, hot dog, pizza, those kind of things. There's really no minerals in any of those foods. And then the last one are the vitamin Bs. So specifically the B6 and vitamin B12. Because B6 actually works together with magnesium. They both have to work together or have to be both present to make it work. But,
they both also
yes.
are required for magnesium and vitamin B are required by tryptophan to create serotonin.
Yep. So a lot of those, so a lot of those vitamins are actually needed for building the brain chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine, all of those, and GABA, all of those.
GABA, yeah.
So yeah, I was like, oh my God, like there's all this information out there and we're not using it. And I learned a lot from my patient with autism too, because back then, like 10 something years ago, there's not much information about diet or nutrition. If you ask any doctors, they're like, oh, the diet have nothing to do with that. Like that's the answer you're gonna get. But then I was like, but all these patients with autism and ADHD that I talked to, when they changed the diet, everyone says it worked. But then the doctor keeps saying is no. And then I keep looking up research. All the papers that, oh yeah, it kind of worked, but we don't know. Like,
right, exactly. And so, yeah, so I think now that we've learned about the vitamins and the deficiencies and things in ADHD, there are a lot of different foods. I just wrote a blog article that's linked in my post of all the like foods that are tryptophan that's contained, or tryptophan foods, as well as vitamin B and magnesium based foods. A lot of them are avocados and sweet potatoes and chicken. And I think that one of the things I wanted to talk about is why plant-based protein is not enough for those with ADHD.
So the plant-based protein, I actually wrote an article recently about that. So generally, I don't endorse a vegan diet. That's like one of the worst diet for people with ADHD or any kind of gut symptoms. Because first of all, so the vegan diet, it relies on a lot of plant food. Nothing wrong with plant food if your intestine can tolerate. It's just that with people with ADHD, there's a lot of gut issue. So when you have gut issue, a lot of the plants, especially the beans or the legumes, and grains, because those things have what we call the anti-nutrition or anti-nutrient, which is lectin. Lectin actually attacks the intestine, causing leaky gut. So if you have like any kind of GI symptoms, you actually want to avoid those. So if you look at a vegan diet, most vegans get their protein from beans and nuts and seeds and all those. So, and a lot of grains, right? So they usually eat a lot of whole grain stuff. So if you look at the diet, it's actually very damaging to the intestine. And also it's very low in fat. With ADHD, the ADHD brain doesn't process carbs and sugar that well. So when you go on a high carb diet, like a vegan diet, even though it's healthy carbs, but you just don't have that amount of fatty acid that you can get from eating a normal healthy meat-based diet. And when I say meat-based diet or plant-based diet, like when I say plant-based diet, I mean you're eating about 75% of your plate of coming from plant and about maybe 25% animal protein. So it's not like what people think like a paleo diet, like you just eat meat and nothing else. So we still emphasize on a lot of like healthy vegetables.
So do you recommend, I do a high fat diet with
Mm-hmm.
coconut oils, good oils, not the bad seed oils,
Yeah.
and,
Like,
you know, chicken,
yeah.
lamb,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, salmon, fatty fishes.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else that you recommend as well?
Yeah. So the diet that I advocate is similar to the paleo diet actually. So, but I call it a plant-based, a real food plant-based because you still need to have a lot of vegetables because that's where you get most of the vitamins and minerals from. Because I always explain, the way I explain to my patient is the reason why you need the vegetables or the plant food is because the plant grew up from the dirt and it absorbs all the nutrients from the dirt. Otherwise, we'll have to eat the dirt to get the vitamins and minerals. So that's why we need to eat the plant. And then we eat the animal protein for the fatty acids and other vitamins and that we don't get from plant food. And then, of course, the plant-based versus animal-based protein is the animal protein is higher quality because it has all the essential amino acid that our body needs. And if we look at how it affects the ADHD brain is, we do know that the ADHD brain is lower on certain brain chemicals. And I as
Like
okay,
dopamine
yeah, like dopamine and then serotonin and all those
and
things.
norepinephrine, yeah.
Yeah. So all of those are a type of protein, right? So the medication works. I always like, yeah, the medication help boost those levels, but where those chemicals actually come from originally, right? The medication doesn't make your body mix more. It just make whatever amount of brain chemicals you already have circulate longer in the system. That's what the medication does. But ultimately, your body still have to be able to make those brain chemicals. That's the reason why having a higher protein diet is so important. And we need to be picky about the type of protein as well, because it's not like, oh yeah, I eat a high protein diet and your body can make those brain chemicals, especially like dopamine, which is one of the most talked about one with ADHD, because dopamine is one that helps you focus and stay on task. And one of the main component of dopamine is actually tryptophan. I think tryptophan and tyrosine. So those specifically comes from like animal protein. So
Yeah.
you can get it from plant, but you probably have to eat a lot of nuts and seeds and things like that to get it. But eating a higher protein diet will help. And then you mentioned what other food will be good for ADHD will be like fermented food as well. Because so fermented food, the reason why is because the bacteria in the fermented food actually helps to digest um, your food for you. Because some of the things that we eat, we can't really digest 100%. But the bacteria can kind of like clean up after us and then release more nutrients from the food. And also, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is the bacteria in our intestine is actually making some of the brain chemicals. So like how researchers are actually finding out that our guts is our second brain, which is quite true, right? Like people talk about like, oh yeah, I have this gut feeling. So the bacteria in the intestine is actually making some of the brain chemicals, which actually cross through the membrane and gets to our brain up here. So that's why like
Yeah, because
a lot of
90 to 95% of our serotonin is located in our guts.
yeah,
And in order to have a
yeah,
conversation with our brain, we
yeah.
need to create serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine and GABA. And all of those things are created in the gut to have a conversation with our brain.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why like sometimes people will notice like when they eat certain food, it makes them not feel good, right? And I see a lot of times too, like when people, it's almost like nowadays it's so common for people to be tired all the time. I was like, you know, like that's not normal. Just because everyone is always tired and need a nap after eating, that's not normal. Like food should be energizing, especially if you eat the right kind of food. So I was like, if you need to take a long nap after eating, it's telling you that the food that you eat is probably a wrong kind of food, or you eating too much at once, right? And then of course that also dig into like people with ADHD do tend to overeat more because they kind of self-medicate with like the food for some reason. And that's something that I kind of see more recently, not so much 10 years ago. So
Yes, it's one of we constantly are needing dopamine, which is stimulation, and we try to find that in any way that we can, whether or not that be addiction, food, sex, whatever it is that increases your dopamine, we will gravitate towards, because we're constantly needing that stimulation. So there are other tactics that kids can use to stimulate themselves in other ways. But I have an issue with that, and I've always struggled with that. You know, I keep a lot of celery around. So when I get bored, because I just will I need something, and it's because my brain has difficulty with its dopamine synapses.
Yeah.
So
So there's like, it's not just all about food, right? There's a lot of other things. So like in my book, I talk about this eat to focus protocol. So part of it, majority of it is nutrition, like trying to feed your brain the right kind of food, especially in children, because their brain is still developing. So I focus on what kind of food and nutrients can help the brain to catch up growing. Because the ADHD brain is on average 2-3 years behind. So there's a lot of catching up, right? And then also what kind of food or supplements to help correct deficiency. Because I know, like as a nutritionist, we're always taught that, hey, you need to get your nutrition from food. But I was like, if you have the deficiency, it's going to take forever for you to eat enough to correct any kind of deficiency. So like I do recommend supplements a lot. Like if you talk to other dietitians, they always have, oh, you don't need a supplement. You can get enough from eating food. I was like, no. Like our food supply is so deficient nowadays that it's hard to get everything we need just by eating alone. And then the other things that I also
I think with certain supplements, though, it is important to start with food too, and then kind of add in certain supplements, because people, you know, like I've seen, you know, certain doctors and people like medical media prescribes like 40 supplements a day. And I'm like, no one can afford to do that. Like no one. And I mean, that's all well and good, but like we need simple ways.
So like, that's why like with the eat to focus protocol, the first step is stop putting in any of the food that doesn't serve purpose for the body anymore. So eliminating a lot of the processed food, things that have more chemicals in it than we wanted.
So organic.
Yeah, especially organic stuff, like if you can afford it, because a lot of the chemicals that is added to the food actually interfere with the brain signals and the hormonal system, right? So if we look at the ADHD brain, so it's behind, so we need the nutrients to help it to catch up. And then it's kind of like off balance with the brain chemicals. So we need to make sure that we have enough of the nutrients for the brain to make those chemicals. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not throwing in more junk in the system to make those chemicals more off balance. So that's why you want to avoid like all the processed food, the sugary stuff, because the sugary stuff tends to stimulate the dopamine receptor, just like what's that, like cocaine and heroin.
Just like Adderall, just like Vyvanse, just like Ritalin, all of them stimulate the dopamine receptor.
So that's kind of like taking away things that's damaging the brain and then introducing all the food that is going to help the brain function better. And then at the same time, we also eat the right kind of food to heal the gut. So like I mentioned, one of the things I mentioned is the fermented food. So, but the fermented food is more like a maintenance, but if you definitely have some kind of GI symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, which is very common in kids with ADHD, then I'll suggest like a probiotics to go along with that. And and one more thing is kind of going back to the conversation earlier about a plant-based diet. So about 15% of people with ADHD also have celiac disease. So that's only celiac disease. And then and I don't remember a number for gluten intolerance, but basically celiac disease and gluten intolerance, they both need to be on a gluten-free diet.
Yeah,
So
I'm
that's
gluten free
another.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It took me years to figure I cannot have gluten, but my doctors keep telling me that I'm crazy. Like, you don't have celiac disease. Like he won't
I
even
know.
test.
I've been tested too, and they're like, no. And I'm like, well, I can't think when I have
Yeah.
it. My joints hurt when I have
Mhm.
it. I'm
Yeah.
in pain. I have like aches all over my body.
Yeah.
I break
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. So the symptoms are so like generic. It's hard to determine, but it took me so many years to finally like I think I have something with gluten. And like I said, most doctors just dish you off like, oh no, you don't have it. It's just IBS. That's what
That's what they
I
say. Is it
think.
like it's just IBS? Like you just have to
Yeah.
deal with it. Here's some Prilosec. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that actually really quickly about how Prilosec is not a good thing for people to take?
Yeah. So like I've been put on Prilosec. I've been put on Prilosec, Santac, what's the other one? Protonics for years. And I just one day I was like, you know what? I don't want any of this. It doesn't work. So doctors just put patient on those like free candy. Like we have kids as young as 6 months given those kind of medication. I was like, 6 months, they're vomiting for a reason. Like we need to dig deeper. But those medication we call proton pump inhibitor. So what it does, it basically suppress your stomach producing acid. And I was like, I don't understand. If people have indigestion, shouldn't you try to increase stomach acid to help with digestion? But then doctor just put them on stomach suppressant medication. So bad things can happen because when you suppress the stomach acid, it actually reduces your ability to digest food. And the second thing bad about that is it kind of lowers your body or increase your chance of infection because when we eat food, our food is not 100% clean. There's always bacteria in the food that we eat. One of the function of stomach acid is actually to kill the bacteria that comes into our food. And the stomach acid is actually a pH 2. So on the pH range, for those who don't understand, I'll just explain quickly. So the pH range is range from a pH 1 to pH 14. pH of 1 is the most acidic. Like you probably don't want to touch that kind of thing with your finger. And then pH 14 is the most alkaline. You don't want to touch that either. The neutral is about 7.4 in the human body. So the stomach acid is a pH of 2. So that means that our stomach acid is really, really acidic. And that's the reason why when you vomit, it burns so much in your throat because of the stomach acid. So that's the reason why we need to have that stomach acid to help kill the bacteria. And what we also see is a lot of the kids ended up with what's the infection? C. diff infection, which is like a pretty bad infection that can cause diarrhea for days. So because of the stomach not able to protect the body, so they actually saw a lot of kids ended up with C. diff infection, and the bacteria do make this toxin that affects the brain in ADHD kids. So that's why one of the steps that we focus on is focusing on correcting the gut imbalance, not just simply like make sure that we have the good bacteria, but also wiping out the C. diff bacteria and also the yeast overgrowth as well. Because if you are on a very high sugar, high carbs diet, you're feeding mostly the yeast. So, and yeast is
Yeah.
something that is body naturally. So, but it's just that when you give them the favorite food, they're all coming here for the party and they're not going. And the only way
Right.
to get rid of them is to stop eating all that high sugar stuff and then put the good bacteria into to crowd them out.
So yeah, I think for what I want to say to anyone joining now is that it's, you know, obviously high fat, high protein diet, less carb, like processed foods, and limiting vegan diets, because some vegetables are harder to digest. I know certain ways that they're cooked matters as well. Like I cook my vegetables based off of the reset that I did for Tandy Gutierrez, and instead baking them versus raw is easier for digestion. There's certain brain chemicals that are, or vitamins that are deficient in those with ADHD, with vitamin B6, vitamin B12, zinc, omega-3, magnesium, and iron. And all of those are things that you would have someone look at first, correct?
Yep. So, so especially vitamin D and iron, those are the two that I usually check the labs first before starting them on, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it tends to accumulate in the body. And if your body accumulates too much of it, bad things happen. And same for iron as well. Our body needs the iron to make red blood cells, but if we have too much, it becomes too oxidizing. And it's another thing that you want to avoid in the ADHD, because one of the potential cause of the ADHD brain is the inflammation in the body. So kind of like going back to the processed food, right? A lot of the processed food and sugar, those things are very
Inflammatory.
So, yeah, inflammatory. So those are the food that you want to avoid, basically to calm your body down and just let it grow and heal, especially in kids.
And that's why I think other, ways to get rid of inflammation include like lymphatic drainage and Pilates, like Tandy Gutierrez, she's in here. Yeah. She's, the twisting and turning of the body, as well as acupressure points, adding salt, like Himalayan salt, to your diet.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
Very important to get to basically alkalize your body, correct?
Yep. So, yeah, so like I talk a lot about like how people try and do this healthy diet, right? So the healthy diet that we're taught, like even for me in nutrition school, is like, okay, you need to eat low fat, low salt. And then now I learned so much more. I was like, we need fat and we need salt. And I was thinking,
fat and salt.
Yes. Like you'll be laughing if you ever eat with me. Like we have the salt at the table and we just salt everything.
Oh, I do too. I have a little bowl with just Himalayan salt, and I'm like and also also for my son, with cystic fibrosis, I add salt to everything.
You have to with cystic fibrosis. Like we teach them early on to eat salty food with that population.
And lots of MCT oil and coconut oil for good brain fat.
The reason why MCT oil and coconut oil is good is because, first of all, it's not a processed oil. Second of all, is the MCT oil, because it's shorter chain, it doesn't require much digestion. So it goes straight to the body and it goes straight to the brain. So with the brain not being able to use sugar and carbs efficiently, the alternative is fats to use as energy. Because some of the things or research, they do show that part of the ADHD brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps with focus, executive function, is not as active. And it's not as active is first, it's kind of delayed. Second of all, the energy is not getting there, right? So then if you go on a higher fat diet, and the brain can use fat just as efficiently as energy. And yeah, that's why like I advocate a high fat, high protein, and high salt diet. And like some people still have to take some time to adjust. Like some of my patients, I have to remind them a couple of times, hey, you need to add the salt and add the fat to your diet. And amazingly, a lot of them who follow, they'll come back and say, oh my God, I have so much more energy. And a lot of them actually do lose weight after putting more salt in the diet. Or salt and fat in the diet.
Salt and fat, yeah. No, I mean, I didn't, I had a baby recently, and like I eat a lot of food. I'm talking a lot because I'm breastfeeding too. But I don't gain weight because I eat foods that go straight to the processes that I need. And a lot of these seed oils, I think, is one of the biggest things that I learned, like canola, vegetable Even like all these like fancy ones now, like safflower oil and all of these processed oils cause inflammation.
Yep.
Which
I know.
makes your brain not function.
I know. And like, okay, so I've been doing this for 20 years. When I was in school, that's what we're taught. Like all the vegetables oil are good, margarine is good. I was like, and then now I learned so much more. I was like, margarine is the most disgusting thing that you can put in your body. It's all trans fat, it causes inflammation, it raises your LDL
Thank you.
back to, yeah. And then and one thing that I do notice recently is so I look at patients' lab every day, like patients who are sick in the hospital, they get the labs drawn all the time. And one of the things that we look at is the CMP or the chemical panel. And notice a lot of times like they will mention that the blood samples is hemolyzed. What that means is that the red blood cells broke open. So when they're doing that test and the red blood cells break open, all the minerals inside the red blood cells will come out into the blood, and it will change the results of the lab. And what I noticed is a lot of patients, like recently, the last few years, I noticed a lot of patients, their blood is hemolyzed. I was like, this is so strange. Like, why is the blood cells all?
It's because of the seed oils.
Yes, if you think about it, so we talk about there's monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and then the trans fat saturated fats. Those are the three types of fatty acid. So the processed seed oil that we talked about is the polyunsaturated fats, which we might think, oh yeah, it's not saturated fat, so it must be good, right? But what it is the cell membrane of the red blood cells or any cells on our body is actually made up of fatty acids. So there are fatty acids, there are cholesterol in it. So that's why we need cholesterol. But then I was like, there's something wrong with the people's diet nowadays. They probably eating too much polyunsaturated fats, which is unstable. So when the blood cells and the body cells or tissues are made with polyunsaturated fats, which itself is unstable, it makes the whole cells unstable. So that might explain why when we're running those tests, the red blood cells is always broken. And then if you look at also people with autoimmune disorder, it's probably the same thing, because if you look at autoimmune disorder, we explain it as the body attacking itself and like kind of falling apart. But when I think of it, the autoimmune system is probably we're not feeding our body properly, so our body is not healing, because our body every day is in a continuous cycle of breaking down and repairing. But then maybe we're not doing the right thing for our body, so our body just continuously doing the breaking down, but not so much the repairing, and that's what causing the autoimmune disorder. So that's kind of my theory on that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And we have a question from Maria. What about steep tea with milk cream?
Yeah, so that's actually really good. So it kind of depends on what your purpose. So caffeine is actually something that is good for the ADHD brain, because it kind of helps to wake up the brain function. So the tea you can do, so tea definitely have some caffeine, but not as much as if you find in caffeine, but some in coffee. But some people do find that drinking coffee tends to increase your anxiety, which I kind of start noticing that is happening to me lately. So I've been switching to green tea. So green tea have a lot less caffeine than coffee. But what's special with green tea, we're talking about the matcha. So I'll explain that later. So with green tea, there's some caffeine in it, but it also has something called L-theanine, which people who kind of follow this. Yeah, so the theanine actually helps calm you down. So if you think, okay, so you have the caffeine to kind of wake you up, but then you also have the L-theanine to calm you down. So it's not like caffeine from drinking coffee, right? You drink coffee, you get that burst of energy, like, okay, I can conquer a world. And then later on, you get that crash when the caffeine wears off. But with green tea, you don't get that. You get that waking up sensation, but then it kind of wake you up on a more steady level because it calms you down at the same time. And then you mentioned about the cream and milk. I love doing that. Like my daughter always laugh at me like when I drink coffee because I'll have this much coffee but then this much cream in it. She's like, why are you even drinking coffee? Why don't you just drink the cream? I was like, because I need the fats.
I do know for me, dairy can be very problematic, but that's,
Yep.
I don't know if you've talked, I don't know about what you say with ADHD, but dairy can also be a trigger. So the certain types of creams, and it just really depends.
Yeah, so I do also mention in my book to avoid dairy as well. So dairy and gluten are the first two things to avoid. So both the gluten protein and the dairy protein or the milk protein actually not very well digested. So what they form is something called casomorphine or gliadorphins. So they both kind of like act more like, what's that called? Opioids. So it stimulates the brain. So that's why like you see a lot of kids or even adults with ADHD, they just crave milk, crave sugar, because those things, when they eat it, they get a dose or boost of morphine or morphine-like substance that goes to the brain. So that's another thing that I recommend avoiding is dairy product. So when I talk about cream, it's usually like coconut cream. That's what I use. Or some people use the MCT oil, kind of like the bulletproof coffee.
Yeah, it's so good. I use coconut cream, coconut milk, coconut oil, MCT oil, all of those. You have to be very careful with nut milks too, because a lot of them have really bad processed ingredients in them, which we could go on and on and on about all of those. There's just so many.
Much.
Oh my God. Like
food. And then
like guar gum and casein, and there's just like
all the
if you
junk.
You know what, I would give homework to everybody watching. If you are, eating a lot of processed foods for 1 week, just write down every ingredient on the back of your processed foods, and I swear you'll stop eating them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, right? Like, so on my blog, so it's a lot of parents, and I put out information like, oh, these are healthy snacks. I get a lot of parents like, oh, but my kids won't eat this. And I was like, okay, so how did you get them to start eating chicken nuggets in the first place, right? You just offer them and keep offering them, right? And then like some of the supplements that I mentioned, and sometimes parents like, oh, isn't that too much vitamins or supplements? I was like, no, if you're missing something, it's really not too much. It's probably going to take a couple of weeks to get everything back up to normal. But
and so you would recommend parents having their kids tested for their levels of different vitamin deficiencies, just because you don't want, say they are, they have enough iron or they have enough vitamin D, then you don't need to be supplementing with those things because, too much is not good. I know we've been talking for about 40-50 minutes. I could talk forever, but I do have a kid I got to go back to soon.
No worries. Oh,
he's a little guy. We do have one more. How do you know that milk is not digested well?
Because you have symptoms. A lot of times, like what I notice is people are actually having reaction to food, but they're just ignoring it. Like sometimes you might have like skin rash or acne. A lot of times doctor tells you the acne have nothing to do with your food, but everyone says if I eat milk or chocolate or things like that, they'll break out, or the asthma. Asthma is highly associated with milk allergy. Like there's so many things that is associated with milk and gluten intolerance, but of course the doctor says nothing wrong with it. Like just eat whatever you want, right? Because doctors are not trained in nutrition. So,
I know.
but I'm more getting advice from them. So
I know, right? It's But these are why these kind of conversations are so important. And I'm so thankful to you for taking the time. We're definitely going to have to do another one just on like supplements, or one just on bad, products in processed foods to avoid and things like that. But I mean, we literally could talk about this for 24 hours, I'm sure. But
I know.
I guess if anybody else doesn't have any more questions, we'll see if anyone has any questions. I think for you, if you could say anything to someone that's struggling with an ADHD diagnosis, or a parent struggling to help their child, thrive as you did with your daughter, what would you say to them?
Like, I would say the first thing is just believe that there's something that, just believe in them. Because what I see is a lot of times parents freaked out with the diagnosis of ADHD, and everything that the kid does is like, they're like, oh my God, it's the ADHD. Like with my daughter, I never mentioned to her that she have ADHD. I never even mentioned that word. I was like, you just need more help with focusing. So that way I don't plant this idea in her head that there's something that she can blame her behavior on. And I always remind her that everyone is special in their own way. Your specialty is you're good at math and like all this sciencey stuff. Your reading and things is not the best. So we'll just do things to help you be better with your weakness. But I never tell her that, oh, you just can't focus, so don't bother with that. I just tell her, there's gonna be some areas that you're not good at. We know about it, and we try our best to work on those and be better with it. And just keep believing in them that they can be as good as kids with no ADHD or any other health problems. Like, I work in a hospital next to all these different doctors. I can tell you which doctor have ADHD themselves. Like, a lot of these doctors who become successful go through medical school, go through the tests and residency. They can become a doctor, healing people, treating people. Your kids can too. But you just need to believe and stop reminding them every day that they have a deficiency.
And also, for certain kids, it is important to know that they have this, because it helps them feel less alone. But also knowing that it's a superpower, it's not a deficiency.
Yeah.
And I think that is, the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Like, I've found a lot of help online talking about it, because I found like, wow, that person's like me, or I'm not alone, or wow, like I thought that was just my personality, but it's actually something that, someone else is struggled with. So that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I guess I should mention that, like, more like not putting that in the face all the time. Like, it's okay for them to, but it's not something that should be reminded of every day, because you want them to feel special, but not special in that way. So
right, exactly.
And just always reminding them that they're just as good as anyone else. They might need more help in certain areas, and that's totally normal. Yeah.
I think that's so what. Oh, you are not all ADHD. I think that's so important, Maria. And also for those with ADHD, like, if I care about something, if I genuinely want to do something, if I am passionate about it, I can build a website in 1 week. I can, do crazy amounts of things, but I have to want to do it. And I think that if someone wants to become a doctor and that's what they are passionate about, then they can do it. But with the ADHD brain, the ADHD, you need to be passionate about what you're doing, and letting them find that passion and delve into things and explore is so important. But fixing the food first will help to do that before medicating. And also, you can go and find her book. It's linked in your profile, correct?
Yeah, it's on the website.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And I think everyone should go and buy the Eat to Focus book and DM you for more questions or answers. I'm sure that you're happy to answer. Thank you so much, Anna. I would love to continue another conversation soon, but I got to go grab my 6-month-old baby.
Oh my God, that's the cutest age. I love babies.
I know. I know.
Well,
He's
thank you
learning
so
about
much.
food. Thank you
Yeah,
so
I
much.
know. Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye.
You, bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank